Well, Jason Segel, or is it now a part of your official name, Independent Spirit Award nominee, Jason Segel? Tell us about, before we talk about the movie, tell us about getting that nomination and what that would mean. That means to you from that particular group.
Well, I mean, it's a real honor. I think, there's this sort of cliche of saying, well, you don't do it for the recognition, but I would really be lying if I didn't say that it's just a tremendous honor to have the movie be recognized, and Donald, the writer, and my performance. It really means the world to me, because it was a really scary role to take on. So the fact that people are responding to it the way they are is it's really gratifying for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to ask you, starting off, congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
So playing somebody as enigmatic as David Foster Wallace, what kind of research did you do in order to take on that persona?
Yeah, well, I think Infinite Jest, his book, was the best blueprint I had for how he was feeling at the time. I've done a lot of press tours myself, and the movie takes place over the Infinite Jest book tour. So I thought a lot about where my mind is when I'm on a press tour, and it's really about the themes of the thing I'm discussing. So I thought that if I really dug into Infinite Jest and what he was trying to say in that, I would probably get pretty close to what he was thinking about during those 4 days. And so you read Infinite Jest, and it's when I read it, I felt like it was a distress beacon. It was somebody saying, hey, wait a minute, I've been told that doing X, Y, and Z is going to make me feel a certain way, and I'm doing those things, and I am not feeling good, and does anybody else want to join me in that discussion? And that idea, that theme, hit me really hard as to where I was in my life, and I think where all of us, we reach this moment, in our early 30s, mid-30s, where you start to realize, wait, I've been doing the stuff I'm supposed to be doing for quite a while now, and I don't seem to have the feeling that I've been promised I'm going to have as a result. And so that's sort of what I zeroed in on.
That's so funny. I was actually going to ask you if Infinite Jest played any part in your research, because I know that you're a fan of the book, as am I.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was really interesting. I hadn't read Infinite Jest before this movie, and so I in my prep I knew that I had to read it and read it well and thoroughly, and so I started a book club in my little local town with some guys who are around my age, and whenever you're around a new group of people, there is some posturing that goes on or whatever. And in talking about Infinite Jest, what happens really quickly is all of these things melt away, and it turned into 4 grown men talking about feelings of like existential loneliness. And it made very clear to me why people take David Foster Wallace so personally. Because when you read that book, he is you. He offers a surrogate experience. And in a lot of ways, that's what we try to do with the movie as well.
Mm-hmm. As you did your research and prepared and listened to his voice and just did all the things you had to do, what was that one key in the preparation process where you went, oh, okay, I think I know what to do here?
Well, I don't know that you ever feel that way. I think that for me, I mean, it's a good thing that at some point he said action, because I could have prepared forever. But then at some point you show up to set and the director says action, and then you really have a brief window of time to start acting before it gets awkward. I think that one of the things I zeroed in on was when you are dealing with feelings of depression and loneliness, and some of those things are chemical, you can't think your way out of some of them. You can try, and you can use all the mental gymnastics at your disposal to convince yourself everything's okay, but there's this other thing going on, and I think it's a little bit like having a twisted ankle, that even when you're sitting, you are aware that you have a twisted ankle, and at some point you're going to have to stand up, and it never leaves your mind. You're kind of fiddling with it while you're sitting there, and you're preparing to stand up and trying to plan the shortest route, and I think that that's sort of what I try to take into the performance emotionally for him, is a guy who, no matter what was being discussed, was aware that right around the corner he could not feel so good if he wasn't careful.
Mm-hmm. wonder if you could talk a bit more about what the director gave you, like on the set or during rehearsals, that really helped you with your performance.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I've done a lot of improv comedy, as you guys know, coming up, and there's a lot of, we'll figure it out on set that goes along with that, which is fine. Sometimes you find some really magical stuff. This was the first experience that I've had where almost all of the work was done in prep. Where you weren't going to paraphrase these scenes because a lot of them are taken verbatim from the real conversations, and nothing I'm going to think of is going to be as smart as David Foster Wallace's actual words. I mean, you read those things and they sound like they've been crafted. I have the recordings. This is a man who is able to talk in fully formed arguments off the cuff, paragraphs with a thesis and supporting points and a conclusion. And you can watch him on Charlie Rose and see that in action. So I think what was important is James and I talked about every scene and what it was about, because it's not just about the thing on the page. There's a whole other chess game going on between these two guys over these 4 days. So that by the time we arrived on set, and he did the same thing separately with Jesse, by the time we arrived on set, we both knew what was going on for each of us. And the goal was just to be as honest as possible between action and cut. Really try not to do too much because, the last thing you want this to feel like is a vanity project. And the other thing you don't want is it to be two guys saying smart things back and forth to each other. So Jesse and I both had differing opinions about what was going on in each scene, and we didn't tell each other what our opinions were. We just showed up and acted with / against each other every day.
I want our viewers and readers just love technical behind-the-scenes kind of questions, so I want to ask a couple in a row. Yeah. Was it done chronologically?
No, we didn't have the money for that, unfortunately. We shot over 25 days, so the first scene we shot chronologically is the scene where Jesse arrives at my house, and then when he comes in and we're feeling each other out. So that happened. That was the first thing we shot, and any sniffing each other out you can feel on screen is actually happening. He's never seen me act as David Foster Wallace. I've never seen him act as David Lipsky. Literally the second scene we shot was the end of the movie. The monologue at the end of the movie where Jesse and I have our big sort of let's get into it fight. So it was really trial by fire. We jumped right in. We jumped right in really hard and really fast.
And are you a good memorizer? Because like you said, this type of script, you can't go off book.
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting question. The answer is yes, I'm a good memorizer. But what was really, that's sort of a developed skill, I think, as well from doing, I've been working like every day for the past 17 years. You get good at it like a muscle. But what was really interesting about this experience is the real struggle is trying to make sure you understand everything you're saying to the point that it feels like it's your own thought. Because there is some really intelligent conversation happening, and some thoughts that on first read are sort of beyond me. Like, what is he trying to say here? And so it was really about reading the stuff over and over and over and think about, okay, what is he trying to express? What is he trying to say to this guy? What is he hiding? What is he being overt about? So that when I spoke, it didn't sound like I was just reciting a really intelligent monologue.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing that really helped is Jesse and I drove together to work every morning. We were staying. It was called the Polar Tundra. It was like -15 degrees in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We were staying at this sort of like residence hotel-y motel-y thing together, and we would drive together every morning to work and go over our lines for the day. It was all we would talk about. We would just do the scenes on the way to work. Then we would act together all day, and then on the drive home, we would talk about nothing work-related. We would like go get a cheeseburger and talk about life and dumb stuff.
Mm-hmm. What was the most difficult scene for you to shoot? Or was there one that was particularly trying on you as an actor, or just on the crew in general?
Well, to answer like the more technical side, because you said your viewers are interested, it turns out that dogs have no idea that they're acting, and they also don't understand the plot. They have no respect for my process. There are some scenes where like it's really, you know, beautifully written, and it may be how it happened. Like the dog ignores David Lipsky and nuzzles up to David Foster Wallace. The dog has no idea what's going on. So those scenes were really those scenes were difficult in a funny way. The scenes that were difficult from an acting standpoint were these scenes where it wasn't the big scenes, like the big monologues. You know how to do that. Like you're trained for that as an actor, and you're psyched about those days. You know, they're marked on the calendar. Like this is the big blowout fight day. The scenes that I think are difficult are the scenes where they're talking about pop culture. They're talking about Alanis Morissette, but what's happening underneath is a guy really trying to tell somebody about themselves in sort of a shrouded way. You know, like it's like a first or second date where you don't want to say, like, by the way, maybe I should tell you now I have terrible issues with depression. You sort of try to allude to it so you don't scare somebody away. Those were the scenes that required sort of a delicate touch.
You know, I've asked this question to people that especially have left long series, but I want to ask it to you because when you have kind of a role of a lifetime, which I think this is, you know, your best role, best performance you've ever had.
Thank you.
How hard is it to leave that person behind?
Well, it's a really interesting question. I had a very unique experience on this in that I didn't know if I was going to be capable of doing it. That was very scary and very exciting. And I was really aware that the fall flat on your face factor was totally high. And so I did everything that I possibly could in prep so that when they said action, I felt like, well, I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be. And when James said that's a wrap on Jason Segel at the end of the 25 days of shooting, it was the first time in my life and in my career when I felt like, well, I've done everything that I possibly could, and I'm going to have to be good with that. All I can do now is face the reality of it. So I was really, for the first time, like very satisfied at a job well done.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned before, I mean, we all know that you've done a lot of great comedy work, and I'm a firm believer that doing comedy requires a lot of acting skill. So how did those experiences maybe prepare you for this? I mean, did they at all?
Yeah, well, of course they did. I think that there's lots of different types of comedy. Okay, but there is a specific type of comedy that I came up in, you know, this Freaks and Geeks era, where it was the comedy of honesty. It wasn't, you know, it's not slipping on a banana peel kind of comedy. It's about how honest are you willing to be on screen to the point of painful discomfort. You know, like Forgetting Sarah Marshall isn't, you know, there's not a lot of gags in it. It's a guy having a nervous breakdown on camera. And if you're not being absurdly honest during those things, you're not going to be interested. So I think I have developed a pretty good lack of pride and shame on screen, like a lack of vanity maybe. So yeah, you take that into a part like this, you know, you basically just take away the joke layer. I mean, mostly, David Foster Wallace is also funny, so there are really funny moments in the movie, but I think that the layer that you're left with is the layer that people respond to, which is, wow, this person seems to be just metaphorically naked on camera. You know, they're just being as honest as possible. I think comedians have an ability to do that because they've done it. If they've done really good comedy, that's what they've been doing. They've been naked in front of their audience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, speaking of Freaks and Geeks, one of my favorite shows of all time. I've owned the DVD set for years, but just like last month, I bought that yearbook edition, which I highly encourage everybody to get.
Yeah, it's really cool. You know, when you're in the middle of doing something, it's hard to see it. But as I've gotten some distance from it, I've seen. I just did this thing in New York, like a New Yorker retrospective thing, and they showed a few clips from Freaks and Geeks, and I mean, it was so wonderfully uncomfortable, that show. Judd really, he capitalized on that we had the naivety of youth and didn't realize some of the stuff we were doing was like wildly embarrassing.
I wanted to, you know, we're an awards website, so I hope this question doesn't offend you, but we don't know where you belong in these categories anymore. The studio has been pushing you supporting, and yet at the Spirit Awards you're lead. At the Golden Globes they've said if you get nominated you'll be in the lead category. Where do you come down on all of this?
I mean, I think honestly my answer is that you don't think about that when you're going to play a part. You know, I went in certainly with the intention of supporting Jesse and supporting my director. I'm not really involved in the placements of all that kind of stuff. I think, you know, if I look at it objectively, you can really see it two ways. There's one version of it where it's like Sideways or Whiplash, where it's a two-hander and it's from Jesse's point of view, so it's, I think, appropriately supporting. I also see the Frost-Nixon version of it where you say, well, that's a really, really substantial performance and they're co-leads. I don't think about that stuff too much. I think, you know, it's interesting thinking about it now. I think what makes it especially tricky that you kind of, like, you don't really have a reason to think about, but it's the theme of the movie. David Foster Wallace is the famous one in the movie. And so I feel like that sort of makes it difficult to wrap your head around. I think if David Lipsky was the more famous one, there would be no issue with it being in the supporting category. So I actually think that's a pretty interesting thing.
See, that's the perfect answer because there is no answer. I saw a movie last night that I won't mention which one it was, but we've been wondering whether it was a comedy or a drama. And I told people, I said, I still don't know. It's so right down the middle borderline, which I think you are too, for the reasons you just said, that I think if I was a voter, I might have a little difficulty. But, you know, I know you're just thrilled to be part of all of this conversation and to get the Spirit Award nomination.
Oh yeah, I mean it's yeah, this is the most exciting time of my career. Honestly, it's pretty. I'll tell you something kind of interesting. When I saw, I'd done comedy for so long that I had started to, you know, like your question about placement. I had started to get too involved in the idea of placements, and I had really started to think of myself as a comedic actor. And when I was 17 years old, I felt like I could do anything in the world. And when I saw Lincoln, I had this terrible thought to myself that the only way I could ever play Lincoln was in a Saturday Night Live sketch. And so I thought to myself, man, that's not how you thought when you were 17. You need to break that because you are capable of doing anything. And if you're not, let's find out. So when the David Foster Wallace role came around, I thought, well, you know what? Here it is. Let's find out. Let's do this thing. And so the fact that people are responding to the performance the way that they are is it's a real personal victory for me because I was able to break myself out of a mental box of feeling like I knew my limits. I haven't come close to finding them yet.
Well, I think you succeeded in your quest to, you know, change your image of yourself and to embody this character. So congratulations.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great job, and I'm sure we'll both be seeing you at some of these red carpets coming up.
I look forward to it, guys.
Thank you. I do too.